a number of civilian casualties. Iraqi officials have claimed civilians are rallying to the defense of the capital, but American Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld said resistance had been sporadic. Pentagon officials in Washington say initial field tests on a number of chemicals found near the Iraqi city of Karbala suggest the possible presence of the nerve agents sarin and tabun, as well as mustard gas. They emphasised that their findings were only preliminary and further full laboratory tests would have to be carried out. British troops are now consolidating their positions in Basra after forces took control of large swathes of the city, including the city's main waterway and a presidential palace. British paratroopers are patrolling on foot through the old town. They say they've encountered only minor resistance, although senior officers warn of difficult days ahead. George Bush has arrived in Northern Ireland for his summit with Tony Blair to discuss the latest developments in Iraq. The Middle East is also on the agenda, and at some stage the two leaders will meet key players in the Northern Ireland peace process. Well, we can go now for the very latest from the Iraqi capital to our correspondent there, Raghi Omar. Some of his movements are restricted and his reports are monitored by the Iraqi authorities. Raghi, the 19th day, I understand more bombings or attacks from the air this evening.
A few. It hasn't been as heavy a night. I mean, that may well change, but certainly I think it's been much quieter. And bizarrely, I mean, the Americans are just half a mile from where I'm talking to you from, just the other side of the river, but there's been no attempt to fire at them, respond to them. Several hours ago, I mean, we were watching some of the American soldiers, you know, lazily climb out of their armored personnel carriers, have a chat. Some of them didn't even have their tin helmets on. I mean, brazenly self-confident. But it's been a quiet night. The city's been plunged into darkness yet again. I've run out. I mean, I've lost count. I mean, what night this is. The city's largely been without power. There may be just a few lights in the square behind me, but that's about it. The rest of the city's in pitch darkness. But obviously, I don't think it's going to be as heavy a bombardment in the center of the city because the American troops have taken up positions in, like, the ministries and the presidential compound, so they won't be wanting to bomb them. And
presumably, now they're in, Raghi, they're not going to leave, or while they might, the point presumably is that the presence of coalition forces is only going to increase from here on in.
I think that's absolutely the case. I mean, I would find it amazing if, having fought for this ground, and this isn't just minor real estate. I mean, we're talking about the palaces of the Iraqi leader Saddam Hussein, key ministries, and other main buildings. So the sheer psychological impact of that will just mean that they will not want to give that up, reinforce and press on.
Now, Raghi, in any war, of course, the importance of information or misinformation or disinformation is critical. The Allied forces have been very concerned about attempts to mystify and mislead, if you like, in terms of what they're going to do. But do you think now there is a confidence, having gone into Baghdad, that there is no great mystique and there is no plan B facing them?
I think that's the case in terms of practicalities on the ground and what they've come up with. I would say, however, though, there is, I mean, as you say, illusions or, you know, mystiques, you know, do count a lot in war, particularly, I mean, in terms of how the outside world perceives the real extent to which either side has strategic control of the city or something that resembles real control of the city. And I think the fact that you do have senior Iraqi officials still coming here right to this roof where the international media gathered, going live on air right round the world, you know, on the BBC, on Al Jazeera and other networks, and giving their version of effects gives the illusion that this is a divided city. And I think that's the key point to which you're addressing.
Okay, Raghi, thanks very much for joining us.
Well, for a detailed look at all the military action unfolding in Iraq, I'm joined now by former Royal Marines officer Duncan March. Duncan, although we just heard Raghi talking about Baghdad, let's us start in the south and move northwards. Basra, an extraordinary turnaround from events within the past 48 hours.
Yeah, exactly. I think for the first time the coalition force, when they said actually in control, I think this really does apply. We saw all of the British forces, all the 3 brigades, the 7th Armoured Brigade, we saw the 16th Air Assault Brigade, and we saw 3 Commander Brigade, all of them working together with the help of some US Cobra helicopters. They came in from basically all angles of the city and moved in basically right into the centre, and we've eventually seen So we've eventually seen the main thrust of the British forces. Now, it's the paratroopers to the north here that have actually come in to the actual main part of the city here, and they've actually taken up this north part of the city, and they're actually patrolling. And this is really important because it's the first time we've actually seen coalition forces actually on foot, not with the heavy armour, not with the artillery, and that's quite notable that they're actually prepared to do that. So it really does mean that they're actually in control of Basra. I think they're still going to have, well, not pockets of resistance, but almost very anti-Western, anti-coalition Iraqis or other fighters. But that's pretty much what they've got to expect, and that's going to be going on for months. There's nothing they can do about that. That's going to go on for a fair while.
And another problem that's emerged, obviously, is now that they've actually taken the city, is running it, because we've heard some very slightly desperate-sounding British commanders saying that controlling the looting is almost impossible because they haven't got enough troops to do it.
Well, they haven't got enough troops, and it's also not what soldiers are really for. That's a policing job, and although they can assist the police, and we've done lots of UN operations around the globe, it's still ultimately not what they're actually should be doing, and they're going to find it quite difficult. And they also don't want, they want to be stern with the Iraqis, but they don't want to be so heavy-handed that there's an actual anti-sentiment towards the coalition.
Let's move up then towards the north, I mean, and stop in Baghdad, where, of course, the most dramatic action's been seen today, this dawn raid, right into the heart of the capital. Exactly,
and it really is right into the heart of the capital. The Americans, as we know, about 20 kilometres to the west have the actual airfield, and what they've done is they've moved right into the heart here, with where the actual presidential palaces are, and they've actually taken in heavy armour, and they're just staying there. They're not prepared to move, and they're potentially going to be there all night. That's actually a major move, because you can't just have a tank sat there. You've ultimately got to have people on the ground patrolling around and giving some sort of support. Otherwise, they're going to have Iraqis coming up with rocket-propelled grenades, and even though they're not necessarily going to be able to destroy the tank, get what's called a K kill, they're going to get what's called an M kill, take the track off the tank. And then we're back into this propaganda and PR win for the Iraqis, proving that they can still defend right on their doorstep. So although the Americans have been calling this a tactical raid today, it is actually the thin end of a wedge. I mean, that's quite a significant force that they've got in there overnight. It's significant force that they've actually put in to protect itself. It's very aggressive, heavy armour, but they're not going to, they need far more than that to actually get in all around the city. And if you come up to the actual north part of the city around here, we're starting to see some of the US Marines come in, very, very small streets, again, pretty similar to the old town in Basra. They're going to have to go in on foot. Americans won't want to do that. So they're using a lot of tactical air cover. You may see special forces raids, which we've seen, with the Americans actually just going into the heart of the city and actually getting specific people where they've got intelligence on. Duncan, we're going to have to leave it there. Many thanks for joining us.
We can get more now on the news that coalition forces are staying in parts of Baghdad tonight. Our correspondent Nick Witchell is in Central Command, the headquarters of the coalition operation in Qatar. He's been speaking to a US military spokesman.
Captain, what's your understanding of the situation tonight in the center of Baghdad?
We continue to have our forces in the heart of Baghdad. The idea of today was another armored raid into the city. The ground commander is making the choice as to how long to stay or to leave. This is not about setting up permanent camps or anything like that. This is about destroying Iraqi military ability there inside the city and sending a signal to the folks in Baghdad that we're there to liberate them.
But the decision has been taken by the commanders on the ground to remain in the center of the city.
That's exactly right. The commander on the ground has decided at this point to stay there in the center of the city for the time being.
And is that because the level of resistance that they've encountered today has perhaps been less than they would have expected?
No. The reports of resistance are still coming in, and we're still compiling all of that information. The fact that we're able to stay in there tonight does indicate some level of security, although I'd really have to add we have met some resistance today.
How would you characterize the resistance that they have encountered?
Tough to categorize overall this early until the commander comes back and makes his reports. We have some reports of sporadic fighting, and for those young soldiers on the ground, when that fighting happens, I can tell you it's pretty fierce for them. But over the whole operation for the last 12 or 16 hours, it's sporadic fighting.
But now that American forces are in the center of Baghdad and are clearly not leaving, might it be reasonable to anticipate that you will be reinforcing those positions within the center of Baghdad?
We're not going to talk about future operations. Quite frankly, we think we have the Iraqi regime on their heels. They're not sure what we're going to do, so it's probably best not to tell them at this point. But what you're seeing there in the heart of Baghdad is not a permanent presence. This is another armored raid. We're just staying a little bit longer.
You've got the Marines coming in now from the east. What's your overall assessment, prognosis about the situation as it is tonight?
What you have on the east is the United States Marines moving up and around the city, making a probe in from the east to check some Iraqi military capabilities there. And we're continuing to move around the city. At this point, we have all the major thoroughfares in and out of the city blocked to prevent any military from going in or out of the city.
And much fighting around the city on those routes in and out?
There was some fierce fighting over the east. The Marines were involved in some pretty tough battles today. But as far as the checkpoints, they sound pretty quiet at this point.
And finally, then, your overall assessment of the situation?
I think today was a good day. But again, I would consider it to be one day among 2.5 weeks of pretty good days. We may have some tough battles ahead. This isn't over yet. It's not over until the Iraqi regime falls.
That's Captain Frank Thorpe talking there at Central Command to our correspondent Nicholas Witchell.
Now, as we've been hearing, British troops have seized a presidential palace as part of their gains in Basra. Our correspondent Clive Meyer has been in the palace with the Royal Marines 40 Commando. He sent this report.
We're in the main building now of this presidential palace just south of Basra. Saddam Hussein built it back in 1990, and we understand that it stands on grounds that was actually part of a public park that everyone could go to, but of course for the last few years it's been sealed off. Saddam Hussein, we understand, according to local people, didn't spend that much time here, even though this was his summer retreat in the south. As you can see, a lot of damage in here. It's been neglected for quite a few years, but if you look up at the ceiling here, absolutely beautiful, ornate tile work and marble. Must have cost a pretty penny. In here is one of the bathrooms. Again, more damage, but as you can see, a lot of gold taps there in the shower unit. And the old soap holder even is made of gold. But of course, as I say, a lot of damage in this part of the building. A lot of money was spent on this bathroom, as you can imagine. A lot of money spent on this presidential palace. We understand that this area is actually pretty well to do. A lot of Saddam Hussein's closest lieutenants kept their holiday homes here just south of Basra. And as I say, this was his summer retreat. Some of the troops here from the coalition forces, British Marines, have taken over the building now. We're walking through this area, and as I say, again, pure, sheer opulence. A lot of money spent, but of course now it's in the hands of coalition forces, and this is very much a palace that Saddam Hussein will not be going back to anytime soon.
Well, there'll be more Iraq news, of course, to come, but first we're going to get the sports headlines with Mike Bushell.
David, thanks very much. Hello once again. Well, Blackburn Rovers have boosted their chances of a place in next season's UEFA Cup with a 4-0 win at Fulham. Rovers had just hit the bar, in fact, when a cross there from Gary Flitcroft struck the arm of Lee Clark. Now, the home side did protest, but even if it wasn't intended, there was definite contact. David Dunn stepped up to take the perfect penalty, really, to give Rovers the lead. And it was 2-0 when Turkey's Hakan Suker worked his way free inside the 6-yard box to score his first goal for his club. And it got worse for Fulham in the second half. Damien Duff would have been surprised as well to see his shot bobble over Mike Taylor, who should really have saved that one. And then a really impressive bit of skill from Suker, followed by a neat finish, showed just why Graham Souness was keen to bring him into English football. Blackburn then up to 7th, 3 points behind Liverpool. In the first division, a Neil Shipley goal was enough for Wimbledon to beat FA Cup semi-finalists Sheffield United, who stay in 3rd. Well, Manchester United have arrived in Spain ahead of their Champions League quarter-final first leg against holders Real Madrid. But Figo, Zidane, Ronaldo and all, of course, the most glamorous and exciting club football side in the world.
It's not just about winning games here. You have to win in a style that they enjoy. You know, there's no chance of winning 1-0 and hanging on to a lead. No chance of that. You know, if you win 1-0, You know, I've said it, and it's a weird thing to say sometimes to prefer to draw 3-3 in a fantastic, exciting game than win, you know, in a boring 1-0 victory.
If you look at the record in the World Cup, or the stats of the World Cup in the last 3 or 4, it doesn't compare anywhere near the Champions Cup in terms of entertainment, goals, excitement. It doesn't come anywhere near it. This is a tournament, no doubt.
Now, away from football, Lennox Lewis is likely to face the Canadian Kirk Johnson in his next world heavyweight title defence. The fight looks set to take place in Buffalo, that's in New York, on the 21st of June. But doubts still remain over whether Lewis will step into the ring again with Mike Tyson. The former champion must decide a week from now if he wants a rematch or not. If not, Lewis could fight the Ukrainian Vitaly Klitschko instead. That's the sport for now. More from me later on.
Mike, thanks very much indeed. Well, it's time now for Business Today with Manisha Tank and John Terrett.
McDonald's is starting over. It's a new approach for the fast food giant.
And Britain's chief cartel buster tells us his new powers to send bosses to jail will help stamp out price fixing.
In New York, a rally fizzles. The Dow closed up 23 points to end the day at 8,300. The Nasdaq closed 6 points higher.
And meanwhile, over here in London, the FTSE surged ahead by 121 points. That's more than 3%. Hello there, a warm welcome to Business Today. I'm Manisha Tank in London.
And I'm John Terrett in New York. Now, later in today's programme, we'll be reporting on how companies who need a financial rescue are getting little joy from the stock market. First of all, though, the US fast food giant McDonald's on Monday unveiled a major plan to revive its business. McDonald's is trying to reverse a slide in market share, which recently contributed to its first ever quarterly loss. That was at the back end of last year. The company says it will cut capital spending by $800 million to pay off debt and increase dividends. McDonald's also plans changes to its food operations, including a healthier menu. Well, joining me now is our North America business correspondent, Stephen Evans. Stephen, you've been following this story closely. What do you think is the fascination with what really is just one company's change of strategy?
Well, it's one company, but it's McDonald's. It's the world's biggest restaurant company, but it's also an icon, isn't it? It's not just a symbol, it's a way of doing business. It's a symbol of an American global style of doing business. The idea was that wherever you went on the planet, there would be a Big Mac, and it would be much the same as the Big Mac you had back here in New York or wherever. That policy clearly hasn't worked. There was that first ever quarterly loss in 55 years of history, and they basically admitted just across town this afternoon here in New York, the executives all in a line there for this presentation to investors, that basically that thing hadn't worked, that the customers had changed, the world had changed, McDonald's hadn't changed with it, and now it would change. So that idea of cheap food, fast, they're going to try and change it pretty radically, and I think try and tailor themselves for different niches in the global market.
Now, as you say, McDonald's made its first ever quarterly loss since being formed in Des Moines, Iowa, I think back in the 1950s, the back end of last year. You think that this overhaul is long overdue, or is it something that's recently come to light as needing to be done?
There is a debate about whether McDonald's is suffering from global anti-Americanism. We see McDonald's stores being the focus of all the anger, France, Beirut, whatever. But it's much more fundamental than that. Basically, it seems to me that global taste has changed. People don't want that cheap burger anymore. The real test of McDonald's strategy is they're going to bring in things like a premium hamburger. They're going to try and train their staff so that they smile and they apologize. They're basically going to try and take themselves upmarket and have some upmarket prices, one suspects, but also then have the niche at the bottom of the market. Can McDonald's appeal on grounds of quality when it is McDonald's? Can it change that image? It will have a lot of advertising around the globe, but it's a big change to make.
Gosh, it'll be fascinating to see what happens over the next year or so. Stephen Evans, thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Now, over here, companies who attempted to make life easy by agreeing to fix prices with their competitors had better watch out. The Office of Fair Trading now wields impressive new powers to tackle cartels, powers which it is confident will work. Business people found guilty of price fixing can now be sent to jail. Niels Blythe recently spoke to the chairman of the OFT, John Vickers. He asked him if it isn't a little extreme to be threatening people with prison for fixing prices.
Let's be clear what we're talking about. These hardcore cartels are where business people meet together, generally secretly, and instead of competing for custom, they agree with each other not to. They agree to raise price or share out markets for their mutual profit, but against the interest of all their customers. In that hardcore case, it's not very different from theft. So in that context, it makes sense to have, if you like, the stick of criminal penalties available, but also the carrot of leniency or amnesty arrangements to encourage the information to come forward to unearth these cartels.
This whole tactic of encouraging whistleblowers to come forward in order to break up cartels is being imported from America. But of course, in America, the whole plea bargaining system seems to work throughout the whole of the criminal justice system. In this country, it doesn't. Surely it's going to be much more controversial over here.
But the American experience perfectly underlines the point. The successes that the US competition authorities have had uprooting a number of cartels, and they weren't just American cartels, a lot of those were global cartels. So the consumer here in Britain and in other countries too, outside the US, have benefited from those cartel busting efforts, successes by the American authorities, and the amnesty arrangements, I believe, were a very important part of that.
So how likely is it, do you think, that we're going to see company directors being sent to jail?
Now, I don't want to put numbers on it, how many will we see within the first X years, because it depends on what happens out there in the commercial world and on the information flow that comes to the authorities. So I think it would be a mug's game trying to predict. What's important, though, this is going to up the stakes a lot for individuals. And a very clear message from US experience is that it focuses the minds of key individuals like nothing else when there are these prospects of criminal penalties.
So how commonplace are these price-fixing cartels?
Since the mid-90s, if you take the last decade, for example, there have been a number of very large international cartels, even given the US system of sanctions, which have come to light. So the idea that this is a lot of fuss about nothing is absolutely false.
That was John Vickers talking to Niels Blythe. Well, let's take a look at how the markets fared in London. The FTSE 100 finishing up around 3.2%, above 3,900. That for the first time since January the 14th of this year. And banking and insurance stocks were up sharply, helping lift the index overall in what's been quite a volatile patch for these markets, as you well know. The likes of AstraZeneca and GlaxoSmithKline doing quite well in the defensive sector, keeping the momentum going upward for pharmaceuticals, and the pound easing off its early highs.
Well, Wall Street offered a vote of confidence on the war effort in Iraq on Monday, but the rally around the flag faded in late trading. Here in New York, a reasonably dramatic late-season snowstorm chilled Wall Street, as you can see. Stock prices had surged early in the day on optimism about an imminent end to the war, but 2% gains were whittled right down in the last hour of trading. It was profit-taking. By the close, the Dow stood at 8,300 level with a 23-point gain. The Nasdaq failed to breach the 1,400 level in the end. It tried hard, though. It rose 6 points.
Goodness me, John, what a blizzard there. On to some other business news today. The fate of British manufacturing might not be as desperate as we thought. Figures out today show a small rise in manufacturing output during February, and that was the second monthly rise in a row. Most economists had expected output to shrink. Companies in the financial services sector have been shedding staff faster than at any time in 6 years. That's according to a survey by the CBI. It found that 43% of financial firms cut jobs in the first 3 months of the year. The CBI also found that most companies expect to cut more staff between now and the summer. And the oil market has again been buffeted by news of the war in Iraq. In New York, crude prices slid on expectations the war may be over soon. But concerns that supplies might be reduced were raised by OPEC as it called an emergency meeting. OPEC leaders said they would have to act to combat a drop in prices following the war. In New York, oil closed down 66 cents at $27.96 a barrel. At the moment, no sound company is very likely to try and raise money by issuing new shares. When you look at the markets, it's not surprising. It's what's usually called a rights issue, but beggars can't be choosers. Take Alstom, the French conglomerate, for example. It's trying to persuade its shareholders to back a €600 million share issue to help it keep lending banks at bay. So have rights issues actually had their day? Nigel Cassidy reports.
Alstom isn't alone. Industrial giants across Europe, like Rolls-Royce, are strapped for cash. So is Invensys. Their company is being touted as in need of rights issues. ABB is another, and let's not forget Chorus, which may have to refinance to survive. New shares devalue the existing ones. Worse, if the price falls further, the extra stock can only be dumped in the market, possibly damaging the company beyond repair. Companies planning rescue rights issues know that they're on thin ice, and so do the bankers who work around here. In the past, they've earned millions for their companies underwriting these issues and then making sure they get away. Nowadays, though, there's no point in spinning a complex investment story to try and get people to take up these new shares. It's more a question of the directors holding an imaginary gun to their heads and saying, give us the money, or the company gets it. One of the city's most seasoned players, Michael Hughes, says rescue rights issues tend to go better if the company's management is changed first, though he says rights issues still have their place and may be better than a forced sale of a company's best assets.
It's not dead, it's not particularly popular because people by and large haven't been prepared to buy shares. But undoubtedly there is a need to refinance a lot of companies, and those who took out a fair amount of debt are really faced with two options. Either they sell some assets in order to repay the debt, or they try to refinance that debt. And one of the ways of doing it is by issuing shares. Now, if they're in the right sector and if they've got the right management, you may find that there is shareholder support for that.
Legal & General is one of the last UK companies with a successful rights issue behind it. In the textbook campaign last autumn, L&G tapped shareholders for £750 million to help keep writing profitable pensions and investment business, a move which made it the envy of other now struggling insurers.
You do have a tremendous selling job that one's got to do, both within the city and for us. I was on flights all over Europe trying to get the message out. But actually the story was cast in around about the first 48 hours, so that the press hopefully came on side. So our first analyst meeting, where we were talking to the people who follow us, got the message that this was not a repair job on the balance sheet. This is definitely about continuing to write new business.
Well, many companies out there may not persuade shareholders to shell out. For them, survival will depend on finding other ways to shore up their balance sheets.
Nigel Cassidy reporting, and that's all from Business Today. But don't forget, you can get the latest in international business on the World Business Report.
That's right, John. It's here on News 24 at 2:30 in the morning. In the meantime, though, let's go over to the weather with Joe Farrow.
Hello again. To see a lot of sunshine for many areas of the United Kingdom on Monday, but that means clear skies during the night. Just a little bit of cloud away towards the northwest of Britain, and that should keep the temperatures just above freezing. Most parts of Northern Ireland, also into northern and western Scotland, but elsewhere we will see a widespread frost through southern Scotland into much of England and Wales, so temperatures tumble below freezing. So a chilly start to Tuesday, but it should be dry and bright for most. Some really good sunshine around first thing. Still a little bit of cloud across the Northern Isles and the Western Isles. We may just see the odd spot of rain here. As we go into the afternoon, most areas will hold onto that fine and dry picture. Now at best, the temperatures will rise up to around 14 Celsius for Northern Ireland and parts of Scotland, but for England and Wales really struggling, up to around 11 or 12 Celsius, and across the south coast we've still got that brisk easterly wind.
Into the heart of Baghdad, US forces are in the city. Commanders call it a show of force. The troops move through the capital, seizing government buildings and one of Saddam Hussein's presidential palaces. Explosions in the city tonight, but the Americans describe the resistance as sporadic. Chemical Alley is confirmed dead by British officers. US troops test suspicious canisters for mustard gas and deadly nerve agents. and the British take control of much of Basra, but the UK commander warns of difficult days ahead. British troops smash their way into Saddam's palace to reveal a world of luxury. And George Bush is in Northern Ireland for a war summit with Tony Blair. They'll be focusing on reconstruction and aid.